In the vast reaches of space, aboard a bustling space station orbiting a distant star, two species stood at the edge of a new era. Humanity had just begun to build alliances with various alien civilizations, a task that was as exciting as it was daunting. One such species was the Xipherians, a race of advanced aliens known for their intelligence and complex culture. Among the Xipherian delegation was Lyra, a young and curious alien woman who had always been fascinated by humans. She was tall, with translucent skin that shimmered under the station's lights, and large, expressive eyes that seemed to constantly observe the world around her. Lyra's species had evolved without the need for emotions or intimate connections like humans. Their method of reproduction was clinical and emotionless, focusing purely on biological necessity. But Lyra had always wondered what it would be like to experience the deep emotional bond that humans shared, something she had heard about in their records. She had heard tales of human love, of passionate connections that could transcend space and time, and she wanted to understand it for herself. Dr. Ethan Walker, a human scientist who had been studying alien biology, was chosen to be her guide in this endeavor. Ethan was an expert in genetics and human physiology, but he had little understanding of the emotional complexities that Lyra was so curious about. He was hesitant at first, unsure how to help an alien species understand such a deeply human experience. But when Lyra insisted, driven by her curiosity, he agreed to give her a basic understanding of human reproduction. The idea that an alien being, with no previous experience in human biology, wanted to explore such a delicate and intimate topic left Ethan conflicted. He couldn't help but feel a mix of concern and fascination. After all, this wasn't just a scientific inquiry. It was something deeply personal. Yet there was something compelling about Lyra's desire to understand humans more intimately. It was a chance to bridge the vast gap between two very different species. The meeting began with the two of them sitting in the station's research lab, surrounded by scientific equipment and holographic displays. Lyra was eager to learn, her eyes wide with anticipation. "Tell me," she asked softly, "how do humans experience this connection?" Ethan, taken aback by her directness, cleared his throat. "Well, it's complicated. For humans, reproduction is not just a biological function. It's tied to emotions, love, trust, and vulnerability. It's something that's shared between two people." He paused, looking at her, trying to find the right words. "You see, we don't just reproduce to ensure survival. We do it to build something more." Lyra nodded, intrigued but still unsure. "So it's not just about the physical act?" "No," Ethan said, shaking his head. "It's about connection, about bonding in ways that go far beyond biology." Lyra's mind raced as she processed this new information. It was unlike anything her people had ever experienced, and she couldn't help but wonder if this deep emotional bond could be something she could feel too. "Do you think," she asked cautiously, "I could experience this for myself?" Ethan was taken aback. The request was unexpected, and it left him momentarily speechless, but he could see the genuine curiosity in her eyes, the desire to understand what humans felt at their most vulnerable. After a long pause, Ethan sighed. "It's possible," he said slowly, "but this isn't something I can just explain in a few words. It's something you'd have to experience for yourself." He hesitated again, unsure of where this conversation was leading. "It's not just science, Lyra. It's something deeper." Lyra met his gaze with unwavering determination. "I want to understand. I have to know." Ethan knew this journey would not be easy, but something about Lyra's sincerity made him want to help. As he looked at her, he realized that this was just the beginning of a journey, one that would not only change Lyra's understanding of human relationships, but perhaps his own as well. And so, the experiment began. The days that followed were filled with questions and uncertainties. Lyra's curiosity about human reproduction had sparked a new, uncharted path of exploration for both her and Ethan. In the quiet corners of the space station's lab, surrounded by data on human biology, The two worked together to explore what it truly meant to create the bond Lyra was so eager to understand. Ethan had agreed to help her, but he wasn't entirely sure how to proceed. Lyra had never experienced anything like the emotions that humans felt. For the Zephyrians, their reproduction was a cold, clinical process, without love, passion, or connection. To her, the idea of an emotional bond seemed almost foreign, yet the stories of human love and deep emotional connections fascinated her. She longed to understand what made humans so different. Ethan wasn't an expert in emotional relationships, but he was the best choice available to help Lyra. He had read about human bonds, about how people could feel both the physical and emotional pull of another person. He could provide knowledge about the biological aspects, but he knew the emotional part of it couldn't be taught in a lab. That would require something more personal. Lyra, before we continue, I think it's important you understand that this is more than just about the body. It's about feelings, trust, and connection, Ethan said one day, as they sat down in the lab to review the next steps. Lyra, eager to learn, nodded and listened intently. She had never felt emotions like humans did, but she was willing to try. So the physical part is just a small piece of it, she asked, trying to piece everything together. Exactly, Ethan replied. The physical act is tied to how we feel about each other. Our emotions influence everything, from attraction to love. You can't just separate the two. Lyra reflected on Ethan's words for a moment. She wanted to know what it was like to feel the way humans did, to experience a bond that was more than just physical, but she knew it wouldn't be easy. Emotions were not something that could be easily understood or replicated. Ethan suggested they start with small exercises. Let's focus on trust first. Human relationships often begin with mutual trust. It's about understanding each other, being vulnerable, and knowing that you're safe with someone. Lyra hesitated for a moment. Vulnerability was something her people had learned to avoid. It was a survival mechanism, but she was willing to try. She needed to understand. They started with basic activities, talking, learning about each other's cultures, and spending time together. Ethan shared stories of human relationships, how love could grow and evolve over time. At first, Lyra found the idea of emotional attachment a bit strange, but slowly she started to see the beauty in it. She listened carefully, understanding more and more what Ethan was trying to convey. There were moments when Lyra felt something stir within her, an unfamiliar warmth when Ethan spoke kindly, a subtle connection that went beyond words. She wasn't sure what it was yet, but it was a feeling she couldn't ignore. She began to see how love wasn't just about physical attraction. It was about trust, shared experiences, and emotional bonds that formed naturally. But Lyra knew that trust alone wasn't enough. She needed to feel more, to truly experience what it meant to be human. She turned to Ethan one evening, her voice soft but determined. "Ethan, I want to try. I want to feel what humans feel." Ethan looked at her, his heart racing. This was the moment that would define everything. Could he really help her understand such a deeply personal part of human nature? Would it be possible for an alien to experience the emotions that humans felt so strongly? "I think you're ready," Ethan said, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "But remember, this is not something you can force. You have to let it happen naturally." Lyra nodded. She was ready to take the next step into the unknown, even if it meant opening herself up to emotions she had never known. She was prepared to trust Ethan, and through that trust, begin the journey of experiencing human connection. The path ahead was uncertain, but both of them knew one thing for sure. They were about to step into something far greater than either could have imagined. The days passed in a blur of experiments, discussions, and quiet moments spent getting to know each other. Lyra was growing more curious about human emotions, the way people laughed, cried, and even fought for love. Ethan had been her guide through this unfamiliar journey, teaching her not only the science, but also the heart of human relationships. Yet, as the days passed, Lyra realized that there was something deeper within her that she couldn't fully understand. One evening, they sat together in the small common area of the research station, watching the stars through the large windows. Lyra's alien eyes studied the distant galaxies, her mind racing with all the new ideas and feelings she was experiencing. The emotions that humans felt, love, desire, connection, were so strange to her, but now she could sense them in the air, in the way Ethan looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention. "Ethan," Lyra began, her voice soft but serious, "I think I'm starting to understand. There's something inside me, a feeling I can't explain." Ethan turned toward her, his face filled with gentle concern. "What do you mean, Lyra? Can you describe it?" Lyra took a deep breath. The words were difficult, but she knew she had to express what she was feeling. "It's like a warmth, like when you're close to someone and you feel safe. I think I'm starting to feel that way about you." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He had always been there for her, guiding her through her confusion, but now he was beginning to feel something shift between them. It was subtle but undeniable. He had helped Lyra explore human emotions, and now he was realizing that he might have started to care for her in ways he hadn't planned. I think I'm starting to feel something, too," Ethan admitted quietly, his eyes not leaving hers. "I never expected this, but there's a connection between us. I can feel it. It's like we're starting to understand each other on a deeper level." Lyra nodded, her eyes searching his face. She had never known a bond like this. Her people, the Zephyrians, were logical, detached, and practical. Emotions weren't something they valued or even understood fully. But now, as she sat with Ethan, the weight of his words and the intensity of the connection they were beginning to share felt real. It felt right. "I don't know what this is," Lyra said softly, "but I want to explore it. I want to see where this feeling leads." Ethan reached out and gently placed his hand on hers. It was a simple gesture, but to both of them, it felt like a promise that they would explore this new, unexplored territory together. The evening stretched on as they continued talking. Lyra asked questions about human love, about what it meant to be in a relationship, and Ethan answered with honesty, trying his best to explain the complexities of emotions he himself sometimes struggled to understand. Despite their differences, they were beginning to see that their bond was unlike anything either of them had ever experienced before. The more they talked, the more Lyra realized that this wasn't just about biology or physical attraction. It was something deeper, something she had only started to scratch the surface of. And as they sat there, in the quiet of the night, Lyra felt an unfamiliar yet powerful pull toward Ethan. It was the first time she had ever felt such a connection, and she wasn't sure where it would lead. But she knew one thing for sure. She was ready to find out. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions and realizations. Lyra had never felt anything like this before, and neither had Ethan. Their growing connection was undeniable, but both of them were unsure of how to proceed. They had crossed a boundary, one that neither had expected when they first started this strange journey together. As the space station hummed quietly in the background, Lyra found herself lost in thought. She had come to Earth to learn about human culture, to understand their ways, and most importantly, their strange emotions. But what had started as a curiosity about human reproduction had turned into something far deeper. She was beginning to feel something for Ethan, something that went beyond their research. One evening, they sat together in the lab, reviewing data. Ethan noticed how Lyra's eyes were distant, lost in thought. He had learned to recognize the signs. Lyra was thinking again, her mind moving through the complex world of human emotions. "Lyra, what's on your mind?" Ethan asked, his voice soft. Lyra turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "I'm not sure, Ethan. I'm beginning to understand what this connection means, but it's confusing. I feel something when I'm near you. It's not just curiosity or admiration. It's something deeper, something I can't explain." Ethan felt a rush of warmth in his chest. He had known that their connection was growing stronger, But hearing Lyra say it out loud made it all the more real. He had felt the same pull, the same growing desire to be close to her, but he had tried to ignore it. He never wanted to complicate things, but now it seemed inevitable. "I think I feel the same way," Ethan said slowly, his voice filled with honesty. "It's like, I can't stop thinking about you. I want to be close to you. I want to help you understand all of this, but I also feel something more, something I didn't expect." Lyra studied his face for a moment, her alien eyes searching for any sign of hesitation. But there was none. Ethan's words were sincere. He was just as confused as she was, but they both knew something was happening between them. It was a connection that went beyond knowledge, beyond trust. It was emotional, and for both of them, it felt real. "I've never felt this before," Lyra confessed. "In my culture, we don't feel things like this. We don't form emotional bonds the way humans do. But with you, it's different. I feel drawn to you, and I don't know what to do with that feeling." Ethan leaned closer, his hand brushing against hers. "I don't have all the answers, Lyra, but I'm willing to explore this with you. We don't have to rush, but we should be honest with each other. If we feel this connection, we should see where it leads." Lyra's heart raced. She had never allowed herself to be vulnerable before, but something about Ethan made her feel safe, made her feel like she could trust him. She had spent her entire life guarding her emotions, but now, for the first time, she was willing to let go and experience what it was like to truly connect with another being. "I want to see where this goes, Ethan," she said quietly, her voice steady. "I want to understand what it means to feel this way, and I want to share it with you." Ethan smiled, a sense of relief washing over him. He had been uncertain for so long, but now he knew that they were ready to take the next step. The boundaries they had once set for themselves were slowly starting to fade away, and in their place, there was something new, a bond that neither of them had ever experienced before. And as they sat together, their hands touching, both of them knew that this was just the beginning. The journey they were on was uncharted and uncertain, but they were ready to face it together. Whatever lay ahead, they would explore it, one step at a time. The days after their conversation were filled with new emotions. Lyra and Ethan had crossed a line, but the uncertainty of what came next lingered between them. Every glance they shared, every small touch, carried a weight of something deeper. Lyra had always been taught that emotions were unnecessary and illogical, but now, surrounded by the warmth of Ethan's presence, she wasn't so sure. Ethan, too, was unsure of how to proceed. He had been her guide, her teacher and friend, but now the connection between them felt different, stronger, deeper, and harder to ignore. He wasn't sure if he was ready to face what was happening, but he knew one thing for certain. He didn't want to lose this feeling. One evening, as the two of them walked outside, the air crisped with the chill of a distant alien world, Lyra finally spoke up. They had been silent for a while, lost in thought, but now she needed to ask the question that had been lingering in her mind. "Ethan, what does it mean to take the first step?" Lyra asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. Her eyes were fixed on the ground, her words careful as if she were treading on unfamiliar ground. Ethan turned to face her, his expression soft and understanding. He had spent so many days trying to help her understand human emotions, but now the tables were turned. "What do you mean by the first step?" Lyra's gaze met his, and she felt an unusual mix of nervousness and curiosity. "In your species, when two people feel something like this, what happens next? I feel like there's something more between us, but I don't know how to move forward." Ethan's heart raced. He understood now. Lyra wasn't asking about human reproduction or physical touch. She was asking about the emotional intimacy that came with truly connecting with another person. It was a step neither of them had taken yet, and now it seemed like it was time. He took a deep breath, his voice steady as he spoke. "The first step is trust. Trusting that the person you're with understands you, that they accept you as you are. It's about being vulnerable with each other, opening up in ways you've never done before. And it's not something you rush. You take it one moment at a time. Lyra nodded slowly, processing his words. She had never thought of emotions in such a way. Her species valued logic and reason, but the idea of opening herself up to Ethan, of letting him see the parts of her that she had always kept hidden, was both terrifying and thrilling. I think I understand, Lyra said quietly. It's not just about physical attraction, but about connecting on a deeper level. Ethan smiled softly. Exactly. It's about understanding each other without words, without expectations. It's about being there for each other, no matter what. Lyra took a step closer to him, her heart pounding in her chest. She was still nervous, but she knew that this was the first step in a new kind of bond. She had never felt this kind of closeness before, and for the first time, she wasn't afraid. I'm ready to trust you, Ethan, Lyra said, her voice barely above a whisper. I want to see where this goes. Ethan's eyes softened as he reached out to gently touch her arm. I'm here, Lyra, and I'll be here for as long as you need me. They stood there in the cool evening air, both of them feeling the weight of the moment. There was no rush, no pressure to move forward too quickly. They would take their time, step by step, and see where this journey led. And in that quiet, peaceful moment, Lyra felt something she had never felt before. Hope. Hope for the future, hope for what they could be together. She had taken the first step, and now, the path ahead seemed a little less uncertain. The days passed in a whirlwind of new emotions for Lyra. Each moment with Ethan felt like another small step into unknown territory. She had never imagined that something so simple could stir so many feelings within her. The idea of trust, of vulnerability, was something she had heard of before, but experiencing it was a whole new world. As they continued to explore their connection, Lyra became more comfortable with the idea of learning about human intimacy. But as the days went on, she realized that this was more than just about physical connection. It was about understanding each other in ways she hadn't anticipated. She still had questions, many of them, about what it meant to truly share a part of oneself with another person. One evening, after they had spent a quiet day in the fields near Ethan's home, Lyra found herself standing outside under the stars, staring up at the unfamiliar sky. The stars seemed endless, just like her thoughts. She had always prided herself on being logical, on having control over her emotions, but now everything felt different. She was starting to feel things she couldn't explain. Ethan appeared beside her, his presence calming and steady, and they stood together in the silence for a few moments. She could sense his curiosity, and yet there was a comforting warmth to the way he was with her. Ethan, she began, her voice tentative, what is it like for humans to connect with someone like this? How do you know when it's the right time? Ethan paused for a moment before answering. For us, it's not about a perfect moment. It's about feeling ready, feeling that bond. When you trust someone completely, when you're not afraid to let go of everything you've held inside, that's when you know. It's different for everyone. Lyra. She turned to face him, her expression serious, trying to comprehend his words. Trust. Vulnerability. It wasn't easy for her, but she was learning. I think I understand, she said softly. But how do you know if the person feels the same way? Ethan smiled gently. It's not always easy to know, but it's about actions. The way they care for you, the way they listen, the way they make you feel safe. You can tell by how they act when you're together. Lyra took a deep breath, the cool night air filling her lungs. The questions in her mind swirled around her, but there was one thing she was sure of now. She wanted to take this next step with Ethan. She had never allowed herself to feel this vulnerable before, but with him, she was beginning to believe that it might be worth it. I've been thinking about everything you've said, Lyra confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. I think I'm ready. I'm ready to take that step. To connect with you, Ethan, but only if you want the same. Ethan's gaze softened as he stepped closer to her, his hand reaching out to gently touch her arm. I want to, Lyra. I've wanted this for a long time. In that moment, Lyra felt the weight of his words, and a rush of warmth flooded her chest. She had crossed a line she hadn't known existed, and there was no going back. But for the first time, she didn't feel afraid. She felt hopeful. Lyra reached out and gently took Ethan's hand in hers. There was no rush, no need for words. It was a quiet understanding between them, a silent promise that they were ready to take the next step together. And as they stood there, holding hands under the stars, Lyra realized something. Sometimes, the most powerful steps are the ones you take with someone else. The journey ahead wasn't certain, but with Ethan by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. The next day dawned brighter than usual. Lyra had slept little the night before, her mind racing with thoughts of the conversation she and Ethan had shared under the stars. She had come to a decision. It was time to take the next step, but there was still so much she didn't understand about what that would mean for them both. She had been so focused on learning human emotions, but now there was a new challenge ahead. Her own body's readiness to fully experience the connection she had been told so much about. Ethan noticed her quiet demeanor as they spent the morning together. She was distant, as if lost in her thoughts. He had seen this before in her, but he knew better than to press her. Lyra was strong, but she was also careful, and this wasn't something she could rush. "You seem a little off today," Ethan said, his voice gentle, concern clear in his eyes. "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for." Lyra looked at him, her heart heavy with a mixture of emotions. "I think I'm ready, but I don't know what to expect. I don't want to disappoint you. I've never felt like this before. I've never felt this kind of desire." Ethan smiled softly, understanding the complexity of her feelings. "Lyra, you could never disappoint me. And I promise you, this is something we're going to experience together. We'll take it slow. We don't need to rush anything. The important part is that we're both ready and we both trust each other. That's what matters." Lyra took a deep breath, feeling a bit of the tension ease from her shoulders. She had never trusted anyone the way she trusted Ethan. It was strange to her, this new feeling, but it was also beautiful in its own way. It felt right to be with him, to share her thoughts, her hopes, her fears. As the day went on, Lyra found herself growing more anxious about her own doubts. Her mind kept circling back to the question, what would it be like? Would she be able to do it? Would she feel the same way Ethan did? What if she wasn't enough? That night, Ethan noticed the shift in her. He could tell she was struggling, but he wasn't sure how to help. He had always prided himself on being a good listener, but this was different. This was something deeper, something more complex than either of them had anticipated. He sat beside her on the couch, not saying anything at first. He simply held her hand, giving her the space she needed to speak. "Lyra, I can't promise that everything will be easy," he said quietly, his voice steady. "But what I can promise is that no matter what happens, we'll face it together. This isn't about perfection. It's about learning. And no one can expect perfection when they're learning something new." Lyra nodded, her fingers tightening around his. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear those words. Slowly, she began to understand that there was no right or wrong way to experience this moment. It was just about being with each other. No expectations, no pressure. Just two people exploring a new chapter of their lives. "I'm ready," Lyra said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I trust you, Ethan. I trust us." Ethan smiled, his heart swelling with emotion. He reached out, pulling her into a warm embrace. "And I trust you, Lyra, more than you know." The weight of their words hung in the air, but in that moment, the only thing that mattered was their shared connection. The rest of the world could wait. As they held each other, Lyra felt a sense of peace wash over her. No matter what came next, she knew she had made the right choice. With Ethan by her side, she was ready to face the next step, together. The night had settled in, a blanket of stars stretching across the sky as Lyra and Ethan sat together on the balcony, their hands intertwined. The air was cool, and a soft breeze rustled the leaves of the trees around them. Everything felt still, like the universe itself was waiting for something to happen. Lyra felt both nervous and excited, a mix of emotions swirling inside her as she turned to Ethan, her heart racing. "I'm not sure what will happen," Lyra admitted softly. "I've never experienced anything like this before. My people have a very different understanding of relationships, but I want to understand what this means for us." Ethan looked at her, his expression warm but serious. He understood her concerns, and he knew that what they were about to share would be a big step. But more than that, he knew it was something they both had to explore in their own time and in their own way. He didn't want her to feel pressured, and he wanted to make sure that she felt safe and comfortable, no matter what happened. "You don't have to be afraid, Lyra," Ethan said, his voice steady. "This isn't about what you've been told or what you think you should feel. It's about us, and what we feel together." Lyra took a deep breath, letting his words settle in her mind. She had been so focused on what she thought would happen, on all the possible outcomes, that she had forgotten to simply be present in the moment. The most important thing was that they were together, here, now, in this moment. The sound of the night surrounded them, the quiet chirping of crickets and the distant hum of the wind. It was peaceful, and for a moment, it felt like time itself had stopped. There was nothing but the two of them, sitting side by side, their hearts beating in sync. "I trust you, Ethan," Lyra whispered, her voice full of emotion. "And I want to try. I want to understand. I just don't know what to expect." Ethan turned to her, brushing a strand of her hair away from her face. His eyes softened as he gazed at her, his heart full of admiration for her bravery. He had seen how much she had already given, how much she had opened up to him. It was clear that she was willing to take this step, even though it was something so foreign to her. "You don't have to know what to expect," he said gently. "We're both learning, and we'll learn together." Lyra smiled, her nervousness fading a little. She knew Ethan was right. She didn't have to have all the answers. They would discover this new part of their bond, one step at a time. The night air grew colder, and Lyra shivered slightly. Ethan noticed and pulled her closer, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. She rested her head against him, feeling safe and secure in his embrace. "I'm ready, Ethan," Lyra said, her voice steady now. "Let's take this step together." Ethan smiled, his heart swelling with love and affection for the alien who had become such an important part of his life. He kissed the top of her head, whispering softly, "Together." As the night went on, the two of them remained close, speaking softly and enjoying each other's company. They both knew that whatever happened next, they would face it together. They had come so far already, and this was just another part of their journey, one that they would walk side by side. The morning sun peeked through the curtains, casting soft golden rays across the room. Lyra woke up, her body still warm from the night before. She could feel Ethan's steady heartbeat next to hers, his breathing slow and peaceful. For a moment, she just lay there, eyes closed, letting herself enjoy the quiet and the comfort of being beside him. It had been a long journey, one full of challenges and new experiences, but now everything seemed to make sense. She had found something truly special. Ethan stirred beside her, his hand reaching for hers. When their fingers touched, a rush of warmth filled her chest. It was more than just physical. It was a deep connection that transcended anything she had ever known. Lyra could feel that their bond had grown stronger overnight. The feelings that had once seemed confusing and unfamiliar now felt natural, like they were meant to be. "Good morning," Ethan said softly, his voice still thick with sleep. He opened his eyes, blinking a few times before meeting her gaze. His smile was sleepy but full of affection. "Good morning," Lyra replied, her voice light. She leaned in and kissed him gently on the lips, feeling the connection between them deepen with every passing second. She had never imagined she would feel this way. She had come from a place so different, so far from what humans knew, yet here she was, completely immersed in a bond that seemed to surpass the boundaries of their worlds. As the morning light poured into the room, they sat up and talked, sharing their thoughts and dreams. There was no need for words of reassurance anymore. They understood each other perfectly. The difference in their species no longer seemed to matter. They were no longer just two beings from different worlds. They were partners, bound by something much more powerful than any physical difference. "I never thought I'd feel this way," Lyra confessed. "I didn't think humans and my people could ever truly understand each other, let alone be so close. But now I feel like I've found a place where I belong. With you." Ethan looked at her, his eyes full of love and understanding. "We've made it through so much together, Lyra. The differences that once felt so big, they don't matter now. What matters is us, and I wouldn't trade this for anything." Lyra smiled, her heart swelling with happiness. They had learned so much about each other. Not just the differences, but the things that connected them on a deeper level. What they had was something special, something rare. The trust, the care, the love, they had built it slowly, step by step. And now it felt like a foundation that would last forever. As the day began, they knew there were still challenges ahead. There would always be questions, doubts, and moments of uncertainty. But Lyra no longer feared them. They had faced so many unknowns already, and they had come out stronger. Together, they could handle anything. Lyra looked at Ethan one last time, a smile spreading across her face. "I'm ready for whatever comes next." Ethan nodded, his hand gently squeezing hers. "Me too. We're in this together." And so their journey continued, full of promise, full of love, and full of the unknown. But no matter what the future held, they knew one thing for certain: they would face it side by side. Their bond had been forged in the fires of difference, and now it was stronger than ever. The universe, vast and full of mysteries, was theirs to explore together.